Hello. Welcome to Politics with our first guest today, Pierre Mauroy, the leader in the Socialist Party. He's been around for quite a long time. Second part will feature David Martinon, the spokesperson for the presidential palace. So today, Pierre Mauroy, hello, senator from the North. Just a few words to introduce you, though I don't think you need an introduction. You embody the whole history of the social democrat part of socialism. You started politics very early. At 15 years old, you grew up with some of the main leaders in the Socialist Party. Guy Mollet, you were part of the founding of the Socialist Party with François Mitterrand. You built up a lot of things together. You negotiated openness with Michel Rocard. You were the first prime minister under François Mitterrand in 1981, and you were the man who changed things based on rigor, the first secretary of the Socialist Party. So your characteristics are mostly fidelity, loyalty, and mostly socialist faith. Do you think that since we've seen a third defeat for the Socialist Party, has your faith been shattered?
Not at all. It is intact. We experienced a defeat, of course.
It's the third defeat.
Yes, but this can be explained by the circumstances. But I had experienced previous events, and I had to adapt myself in a more challenging context, a lot more than the present one.
But are all of these defeats, many defeats are difficult, but are some defeats not more difficult than others?
Yes, but we had to adapt ourselves. In 1974, for instance, after the Épinay Congress, this was extraordinary. We changed life. This was our motto with François Mitterrand. Great campaign. And we really got beaten, but this was a very close call, I believe, 49.9, and Giscard d'Estaing won the election, but really by very little. And I remember on Monday morning, we were meeting with François Mitterrand, and we were ready to get off to a new start and really struggle either further on. And this was extraordinary.
Victory?
And 1981, this was the victory. And the socialists were going to be striking an alliance with the communists, and this was not going to be easy. SFIO and its history with the communist regime in the USSR, with executions of socialists. But we were really ready to buck up, and we really had to deploy efforts and adapt ourselves to really reach that point. And we did it. We made it. And this was an extraordinary period of time. After the Épinay Congress, I was the secretary to coordination, in other words, number 2 in the party, with a young, dynamic party. And this was a general movement, and I experienced 1981.
Once you said that the history of socialists tends to keep repeating itself. Today, what period are you reliving? Is this the eve of an Épinay Congress that you mentioned, or a Rennes Congress?
No, I wouldn't say that. I believe that the Épinay Congress really was an extremely important one. Why? Because the SFIO had been set up to oppose itself to the communists, but had maintained the Article 1 of the Communist Party was nationalization processes of production services. So this is what we had maintained from the old 19th century socialist movement, and how we had to adapt ourselves gradually.
But today, what does this period remind you of? What you're experiencing today at the Socialist Party? You're saying history repeats itself constantly. What does this period remind you of?
Today, it somewhat reminds me of 1974, our defeat, and we had to really get off to a new start. It also reminds me the aftermath of 1993, the legislative elections. Those were terrible elections. Why? Because François Mitterrand, in the second term, he got through very easily. More so than what Mr. Sarkozy got, but we did not get the absolute majority. And as a result, we had to adapt ourselves, and this was the Rocard government. And already at that time, there were centrists, but this was actually opening up to the civilian society. And we had ministers that really were inexperienced in politics. And week after week, they were just leaving because they were not at all adapted to those positions. And the party really experienced at that point a real challenge. In 1993 was a legislative defeat.
So you're sort of the wise man, or you have status as the ultimate commander at the Socialist Party. How would you analyze this failure, well, ultimately Ségolène Royal's campaign failure?
We assume our responsibilities, all of us do, and as opposed to what François Mitterrand and myself thought, we need to accept this 5-year term and this turnaround. In other words, this 5-year term had to give way to more rapid Republican process, and now our president really is quite a fast and hyperkinetic person. But the turnaround, this is really a great change, and if we did not have this turnaround...
But you're saying socialists in the way of Lionel Jospin.
And the others, and all those who accepted that type of analysis. I talked to Monsieur Jospin about what I thought about it.
But that's something technical. I'm asking really, why is the Socialist Party why are they experiencing this tragedy again, third time in a row? It's not by chance. Are ultimately the socialists in sync with the French people? Do they have the right answers?
We're a major democratic party, and everything we do is done with the validation of our militants. And when we need to adapt ourselves to a rapidly changing context, well, this is not easy. Ségolène Royal, for instance, well, she started this adaptation process, and this attracted militants.
When she says something in the evening, the 6th of May, something has gotten started, a wind is getting started. What did she mean by that?
She's right. And she was talking about calling ourselves back into question. We have to go beyond what we thought yesterday. We need to adapt ourselves, and we need to create a genuine parliamentary system, a new social democratic system.
That's represented by Dominique Strauss-Kahn.
Like this labeling process. I was called a social democrat at the very beginning. This was not an accurate description, and this is not accurate. I mean, calling that about Strauss-Kahn is not accurate. Social democracy, this is social. In other words, a fundamental agreement between the labor representatives, the unions, and the political organization. We have no such system today in France. We're not working as they are in the UK or in Germany.
But is social democracy represented by DSK? Could that not be a model for rebuilding the Socialist Party?
No, I would word things differently. I'd try to avoid the word social democrat.
It's not a bad word.
No, not at all, not at all. No, this is not a big word. No, I can actually get ownership over that word. But this is not an accurate term because it gives the impression that the left union and those people working with us on our side, well, we'd like to escape. No, we should not escape. We should actually carry on. We should gather people. We should work on that process and create a new socialist party and work on a French social democracy à la française. In other words, cannot, as in Germany or the UK, we cannot rely on all those labor representatives because there is no general labor confederation.
But SPD made that mature in '59. That's been around for quite a long time. You French socialists is taking such a long time. We're not getting the impression that you keep putting it off till later. Your aggiornamento, this rethinking, introspection, you keep pushing it back, procrastinating.
I like SPD, and I went to Germany quite a number of times, and I worked very closely with Willy Brandt, and I was a member of the International Socialists for 9 years. And let me tell you that in Germany, well, they had also experienced defeats and a very terrible period. 1945 in Germany, of course, was very different from 1945 in France. And as a result, they really got off to a new start with the German state.
They broke away from Marxist ideologies, especially.
Yes, yes. And they really had to shy away from what had been set up by Adolf Hitler. So this was a fundamental and basic change, and this was not a great cost to them. But there was no reason for us to do the same thing. So this evolution had to be a lot slower.
But what about the future? For instance, when Ségolène Royal says we need to revisit the programs for the socialist programs, what does that mean?
Absolutely. This means a breakaway, a drift away from a historical socialist system stemming from the 19th century, which was actually abandoned by each and everyone. And communism, well, we had an alliance with communism, but the Communist Party, the Moscow style, well, we know what became of it after the collapse of the Berlin Wall, and we know what communism represents in China or in other countries worldwide. In other words, a free market communist system, so to say. No, we have to invent something new, and this is quite clear.
Michel Rocard says that the first thing to do to revamp the Socialist Party is to rethink it.
No, let's not go too far. Well, he always comes up with such wording. Everybody thinks. But we need to adapt. In other words, this old socialist party that really went through quite a number of changes with the Épinay Congress, for instance, cannot really change, get back to point nil every 10 or 15 years. So this has to be triggered off, and we need leaders for that purpose.
Okay, we were talking about this, the leaders themselves.
You cannot create any major movement today more than before, but with the television, the media, it was perhaps possible in the past, but today we need to have a leader.
Okay, who is the leader for you? Who do you think that is? Should it be Ségolène Royal?
Absolutely, yeah, she took over.
You would support her?
I did endorse her.
No, as leadership to be the first secretary of the Socialist Party.
The Socialist Party, in other words, the militants, will endorse her. And we know that there are several candidates, and that's our weakness in the major Democratic Party. But this is also our strength, you know, the fact of having high-quality leaders.
And you support her?
She took over, and we need to calm things down and win those legislative elections. In other words, have as many deputies as possible. And Ségolène Royal, I believe, well, she's not the first secretary. The militants will be saying their words. They'll decide. But be that as it may, the role she played in this campaign and the way she carried out this campaign and how she anticipated the future and how she attracted the crowd and the way she actually got 17 million ballots and the way she got ballots from the popular or the National Front, I'm sorry, that we lacked in 2002, and lots of youth from the suburbs, and the success she encountered in major cities. Bordeaux, for example, in Toulouse, in the Paris region. She also scored as a result.
So you would support her should she run for first secretary?
She really imposed herself, and as a result, she has to be considered as a leading personality without necessarily being a secretary nor a candidate.
Because the first secretary is going to be leaving, François Hollande.
Well, the party will say its word here, but I believe that the way she carried out the campaign really shows that she's really at the core. I mean, most of our militants, if they were to vote today, would vote for her as first secretary.
Dominique Strauss-Kahn, are they out?
No. Let's not cast them aside.
I mean, not in the running for the secretary position.
They both have great qualities. Fabius made his own choices, but he made a mistake, and he's got to make up, and he is making up for those mistakes. And so far as Strauss-Kahn is concerned, he could have, but she took over. And they need to be wise enough and accept the current leadership, Madame Ségolène Royal's leadership.
The legislative elections, the knives are going to be coming out.
I will speak out at that time. Right now, I'm saying let's get all together, and I'm not sure there'll be a falling out.
Lacking the resources, you think?
They know all too well that the person appointed as a first secretary, prime secretary, will be elected by the militants, and they know the party, and they know how it works, and they actually know exactly what the situation is all about. And Ségolène Royal is benefiting from great support, and most militants are throwing their weight behind her. And this should cool the situation down and allow us to experience a legislative campaign, and we will increase the number of deputies. One can always do better, much better.
But the blue wave is going to be there, don't you think?
Now, either you leave the current president and is manipulating the republic, and he's actually paving new ground. Okay, people are saying, okay, we should switch from the Fifth to the Sixth Republic. We're actually going much further. We're talking about a parliamentary monarchy, and if you want to prevent this from happening, and if you don't want to give out everything to him, and this would be extremely dangerous to all those who voted for Ségolène Royal, well, in that case, we should get all together and win those elections. And in other words, have as many MPs, socialist MPs, as possible.
We get that. Thank you very much, Pierre Mauroy. We'll be back for the second half of the show with our second guest, David Martinon, right after the news. Thank you.
On débordait un peu. Bonjour et bienvenue dans Politique avec notre deuxième invité, David
with our second guest, David Martinon, spokesman from the President. Hello.
Good evening. Thanks for your invitation.
The French people don't know you well, but will soon get to know your face, as you're going to soon be a frequent guest on TV and radio stations. So just a few words to introduce you. You're very young. 36. Your appearance is somewhere between a dandy and an English schoolboy. You're an ENA graduate. You opted for a diplomatic position, fell into politics very young. At as early as 19 years of age, you were nourished on à la Madeleine style of liberalism until being suddenly weaned and healed by the great Nicolas Sarkozy. You fell for him right away, offered to work for him. He accepted. You provided him convincing notes for over 2 years, winning him over, and you became a full-fledged member of his team. You were his diplomatic advisor when he was Interior Minister. You organized his trips abroad. You became his spokesman, a spokesman who actually speaks. A clean break? But will the clean break really mean no more lip service?
It will be for you to tell me, but of course the present President of the Republic will speak more than his predecessors, who were basing themselves on a more spaced-out communication strategy and who talked in a more solemn manner. I don't think Sarkozy will change in this respect. He will speak frequently but without regularity when he feels the need, so his spokesman will also speak. He'll do very likely, but not just in press conferences.
We've seen him a lot out there on the ground. He does tend to speak every time he sees a microphone. So he went to Le Havre Tuesday for a meeting. We can call it a rally, actually, political rally. Here we have a new president in charge of the legislative parliamentary campaigns. Has he realized that he's been elected president and he's no longer a candidate?
Of course. Otherwise, he would have had a meeting every day. But in this case, he needs a parliamentary majority to launch his political program, which he introduced during the presidentials. And he was keen to demonstrate his commitment commitment and his desire to have the full backing of the French in the Parliament.
Right, but he has a presidential majority. Why get so mobilized? It's not really necessary.
Because a victory is essential if we want to avoid the paralysis of institutions, because no victory is acquired in politics.
The left-wing parties are criticizing his intervention in Le Havre, calling it a rally. They say that the president should be above and beyond parties, should be the president of all of the French people. After having had an openness, is he not back into a strategy of the left-right divide?
Honestly, I think that he gave a certain number of signs after his election, and with the formation of the government, he'd freed himself from these issues, but his election obliged him to open himself, and the composition of his government shows this with Bernard Kouchner, Martinon, Jean-Pierre Jouyet. This is a strategy of opening. It's not really a strategy, it's opening of one's mind, because he was elected with an extremely clear program which he at length presented during the presidential election. He's asking clearly for support, and he wants to gather the largest support so as to fulfill his commitments.
He has quoted the famous revolutionary Danton, who ended up being guillotined, saying, "Boldness, audacity, even more audacity will save France." So Sarkozy, the revolutionary, what does he want to be more bold or audacious about?
That depends on the commentary, but the commitments he made and that he presented during his speech of Tuesday evening, these are very strong and heavy commitments. This is a clean break with the inertia of the last 15 years. The revolution, if there will be a revolution, is precisely there, and the strength of his commitments and his determination to communicate them and implement them. We saw some commentaries, people saying it was too expensive, it's too complicated. He said that he will go right through to the end.
We get the impression that he wants to do everything at once. Is that feasible? Be on all different fronts?
Well, he's going to attempt to demonstrate it to us, but he considers that we need to launch all the reforms at the same time. We mustn't lose time. We need to go quickly because France rapidly needs change and action. It's not because we're going quickly that we're not working hard and we're not consulting people. So he will do as he's always done. He will go quickly whilst consulting people.
A president who goes 100 miles an hour, one day he's in Berlin, the next day he's at the head office in Airbus, at the cafeteria, meeting with the trade unions. He's sort of omnipresent. Is he not going to run out of steam? He has to hold up 5 years like this.
At the same time, you may remember 2002, you were saying that already, that he was going to burn out.
He's never tired.
No, he's French. But with the large amount of votes, people weren't tired of him. And it's the way I see it, he won't slow down.
How can you keep up when you work with Nicolas Sarkozy? Since 2002, you've been working with him. Do you feel like you're on a Mirage 2000?
Yes, it's exactly that. I really feel I'm witnessing something great. We have to go quickly and be very concentrated. It's a kind of miracle, but the body adjusts.
So has your body gotten used to the pace?
My organism has adapted, my body has adapted.
Do you every once in a while?
And from time to time, one gets some sleep. Sometimes I get some sleep.
I feel better about that. All of these reforms, though, this is going to be a Herculean effort.
What kind of rhythm will it be at? The rhythm of
in line with the action or in line with the social dialogue?
No, social dialogue has already been initiated.
But that social dialogue has a specific pace.
But you can see the rhythm, whatever the rhythm, there is social dialogue. We're at the second round of meetings because as President-elect, he welcomed all the social partners individually. And these last few days, on Wednesday morning, he ended with Madame Parisot. And I can confirm that we'll continue to maintain contact with them. And meetings have been fixed for the coming weeks. So in his mind, the reforms require dialogue.
The Constitution says that the head of government determines France's policy and leads it. Here it's the president, with the core of power in the Élysée Palace. What will François Fillon have to do? Isn't he the one who should be doing most? Is he the one that should be talking with the trade unions?
François Fillon was present. 2 points. Firstly, he took commitments during this campaign, so he's going to respect them. He's undertaking to commit them either on social dialogue or tax reform, or on Airbus, or on relaunching the European Constitution. He decided to address themselves. As far as François Fillon is concerned, one shouldn't try to oppose them. They're completely complementary, and if it wasn't the case, Nicolas Sarkozy would have chosen another prime minister. If he chose François Fillon, it's because he prepared the program within UMP, which he knows from top to bottom. He is in accord with it.
But he does tend to keep him in line. If you're looking at the minimum service levels, François Fillon says, first of all, let's discuss with the trade unions, and if they disagree, well, then we can make a law. Whereas that's not the case. Nicolas Sarkozy puts him back on track, saying, no, we go with the framework law legislation, and that poses the foundation for discussions, and then we discuss. Isn't there something very subtle there? Is it a Sarkozian
No, I don't think
difference?
there are any nuances between the Prime Minister and President. I think they're on the same wavelength.
Maybe just the thickness of the sheet of paper.
Really, as far as the minimum service is concerned, they both agree on the objective. That was what presented to the French during the campaign, and they both agree to ensure to give a chance to social dialogue, but with a specific objective.
I'd like to talk about someone that whom we're hearing a lot about recently, but not seeing a lot. I'm just curious about Cecilia Sarkozy's role. People were amazed because she hadn't voted at the second round of the presidential elections. First of all, do you have anything you can share with us?
Well, I don't think she's hiding herself, and I think when the power changed hands, we saw her present. So Cecilia Sarkozy is present.
But what will her role be? Ultimately, because the role of a first lady, we're wondering what her style is going to be like. She's a very modern woman. She's not Danielle Mitterrand. She's not Bernadette Chirac with her gold coins. Might she be a mix of Hillary Clinton and Jackie Kennedy? Elegance? I mean, what will be her role in the Élysée Palace?
There is very likely a great deal of elegance, and both with respect to Madame Kennedy and Madame Clinton. But it's not an official position to be the First Lady of France.
But she has to do something.
On the other hand, well, yes, but with great freedom. And Cecilia is a mother, and her family has been affected by the election of her husband. For the time being, she is looking after family, and she's trying to protect her family. Nobody doubts that when the time comes, she'll make a certain number of choices as to what she could do.
Will she take care of charity organizations? Does she have any proposals?
Had proposals. She's received a certain number of proposals.
Could you please tell us more?
Because she is somebody who's known in France and abroad, and corresponds to a very favourable image of France. It's true that she's been asked to represent a certain cause, indeed a certain number of causes. I'm not going to mention the names because she hasn't chosen them yet, but the time will come when she will decide on what causes she wants to support.
Give us a hint.
Today, in any way, she is mainly dealing with personal interventions as far as humanitarian causes are concerned. That takes up a certain amount of time.
Sticking with the style of the Élysée Palace, the 14th of July, we have the famous garden party that Jacques Chirac loved. What will happen with that under Nicolas Sarkozy's presidency? Because is this going to be a clean break in style again? What's slated for the 14th of July?
This is a surprise, and like all surprises, we mustn't reveal it too early. But there are a certain number of personal ideas.
But what are the ideas?
But he has, as far as the organisation of the 14th of July is concerned, he wants to dust it down and wants to give it a shine which will give it an international shine. line.
International, meaning there will be guests?
Yes, that's certainly being looked into. A certain number of
French
symbols which
people
might
as
be
well,
brought
or in
in.
the news, or stars, celebrities, or will it be closed?
He's not somebody who closes things down, so there are a certain number of avenues along that line which we are actually studying and which we may well implement.
But will it be mixed with the French population as well, which is traditionally invited to these types of
Well, there's
occasions?
no watertight compartment between the French population and those who will be invited.
Okay, the 6th and the 8th of June, we will have the G8 meetings in Germany, and the most depressing issue there would be Darfur. Bernard Kouchner is suggesting a humanitarian corridor through Chad. First of all, you have to win over the other countries. Is this not just putting a Band-Aid on some sort of amputated limb?
It's a very complicated dossier, and I'd like to remind you that Mr. Sarkozy very early on said he will make it one of his diplomatic priorities. There are a certain number of ideas which are looking into and that the President is going to study. What is certain is that there will probably, the humanitarian corridors
But it's not
will
enough.
be established. Well, we still have to do them, one way or another, and Bernard Kouchner has consulted a certain number of partners on this point. Ideas are moving forward, but we can't just commit ourselves in any way. We have to think about how we're going to go about it. And Nicolas Sarkozy said this quite clearly during the campaign.
I'd like to talk about Turkey, because that's a complicated issue as well. During the campaign, Nicolas Sarkozy was clear. He was not favorable of Turkey's adhesion to the European Union, and he even said he would oppose the continuation of negotiations of Turkey entering into the European Union, whereas we see that reality is different. Ultimately, France is not going to veto the continuation of these negotiations. Was it not a false promise?
Well, first of all, the position of Nicolas Sarkozy on Turkey has not changed since his election. He still thinks the same thing. Turkey does not have a place in Europe. It's in Asia Minor as far as he's concerned. Secondly, he said and re-said that his priority today is to break out of the institutional crisis in Europe. And objectively, in Europe, we know what's happening. If we want to find solutions, if we want to solve problems, we have to take them one by one. Today, the priority is to resolve the institutional crisis, to break out of it, and the date is the 21st and 22nd of June. As far as Turkey is concerned, there are several questions within this question. In reality,
he can't stall the negotiations. He said he would, well, but he can't really in reality.
He could, but would that be useful? He hasn't answered this question regarding the chapters which might take place at the end of June. What he said was, as long as nothing definitive has to be decided today, why not leave the issue to later once the institutional crisis has been resolved? This is one of the major issues that Europeans have to reflect about. The question of the frontiers of the European Union is an extremely complex one, and we have to work on it seriously. For all that, we mustn't try and distance ourselves from the Turks, whilst recalling that Turkey is not in Europe, and it doesn't really need to enter into Europe. We're going to try and work on that. We're trying to find equilibrium.
The diplomatic advisor of Nicolas Sarkozy, Jean-David Lévy, went secretly to Ankara. Was it to settle things down, or why?
So, no, he not to calm the spirits.
What's the purpose of this journey?
The objective of this visit, he spoke to the Prime Minister. He proposed to send his special envoy to meet the Turkish Prime Minister's envoys. The idea was that the two presidents and prime ministers speak directly through their envoys and not through their media, so as not to poison the situation, whilst observing that each was camping on their own position. The Turks want to come into Europe. The president of the French Republic doesn't want Turkey to join. Despite these positions, which are distance, we need to find a path so that the Turkish question doesn't pollute the institutional negotiations in Europe, and so that the very ancient Franco-Turk relationship continues to be a dense, rich relationship of shared interests and of political strategic interests, because the French and Turkish army are fighting in different theatres of conflicts like Turkey, so we need to continue to work together, and we need to accept our disagreements in a pragmatic manner. So that is why President Sarkozy's envoy was sent.
Thank you very much, David Martinon.
Thank you very much for
good luck.
inviting me.
That concludes Politics today. See you next week. Thank you for watching.